Did you know there is an 8-mile-wide asteroid crater sitting on a private ranch in West Texas, and that Apollo astronauts trained inside it before flying to the moon? Or that the longest cave in the state runs more than 20 miles under private land, watched over by motion-activated cameras? How about the fact that the tallest mountains in Texas were built by sponges at the bottom of a tropical sea? Well, there is a lot more to Texas than oil rigs, cattle, and big open sky. Look a little closer, and you will find a state sitting on top of ancient craters, sealed caves, and creatures that have never seen daylight. And today we are breaking down 20 facts that even lifelong Texans have never seen with their own eyes. Let us get into it. Fact 20. The 100 million residents nobody counts. Everyone knows about the bats under the Congress Avenue Bridge in Austin. That colony is a rounding error. Across roughly 24 Texas caverns, an estimated 100 million Mexican free-tailed bats arrive every year between April and November, which makes this state one of the largest gathering points for mammals anywhere on the planet. Almost all of it happens underground, out of sight, in caves the public will never enter. The most crowded place in Texas is not Houston or Dallas. It is the ceiling of a cave you have never heard of. Fact 19. The largest gathering of mammals on Earth. North of San Antonio sits a crescent-shaped hole in the ground about 100 feet wide, and what lives inside it holds a world record. Bracken Cave houses an estimated 20 million Mexican free-tailed bats from March to October, the largest bat colony anywhere in the world, and the single largest known concentration of mammals on the planet. The cave and roughly 1,500 acres around it are privately owned and managed by Bat Conservation International, and public access is tightly limited. The greatest concentration of mammal life on Earth is in Texas, and you have to be invited to see it. Fact 18. The pit early settlers called a gateway to hell. Out on the Edwards Plateau near Rock Springs, the ground simply opens. The Devil's Sinkhole starts as a shaft about 50 feet wide and drops into a cavern reaching roughly 350 feet down. The largest single-chambered cave in Texas and one of the deepest in the state. It formed when acidic groundwater hollowed out a chamber and the ceiling finally gave way. Designated a National Natural Landmark, the site is closed to casual visitors, and every single person who goes in does so on a guided tour by advance reservation. Texas has a hole in the ground the size of a stadium, and you cannot simply drive up and look at it. Fact 17. The place native tribes believed led to the underworld. That sinkhole carries a much older reputation than its name suggests. Archaeological sites around it show human presence going back thousands of years, with projectile points and pottery recovered nearby, and multiple tribes regarded the shaft as sacred, treating it as a passage between the physical world and the spirit world. Evidence suggests it may have been used in connection with burial of the dead. Every summer night, the modern residents put on their own display when millions of beignets pour out of the opening in a black spiral, consuming as much as 30 tons of insects in a single night. A site people once believed opened onto the underworld now feeds the hill country by eating its bugs. Fact 16. The longest cave in Texas is on somebody's ranch. Here's the one that surprises even serious cavers. Honey Creek Cave in Comal County stretches more than 20 miles of mapped passage, making it the longest known cave in the entire state. And it does not sit inside a park. The cave runs beneath private ranch land, and the only known entrance is monitored by motion-activated cameras to catch trespassers. Explorers who have permission have to swim through long flooded channels in water more than 20 feet deep, and at one point there are only about 4 inches of air between the water and the ceiling. 20 miles of hidden cave, and the front door is on a working ranch. Fact 15. The river that flows where nobody can follow it. Inside that cave runs something most Texans have no idea exists. Several miles of underground river flow through Honey Creek Cave, feeding the creek above it and acting as a conduit into both the Trinity and Edwards aquifers, the water supply for a huge share of central Texas. Cavers describe swimming through deep, cold, glass-clear water in total darkness with ornate mineral formations hanging inches above their helmets. The drinking water for millions of people begins in a black river nobody is allowed to visit. Fact number 14. The creature pulled out of a well in 1895. Workers drilling a water well near San Marcos in 1895 hit a cavern at about 196 feet down, and what came up the pipe with the water stopped them cold. Riding the artesian flow were pale, translucent salamanders with no eyes, no pigment, blood-red external gills, and long, spindly legs. Naturalist Leonhard Steiniger, who formally described it in 1896, called the find one of the most important herpetological events in years. People had lived in that area for thousands of years and had never once seen this animal. It had been living directly beneath them the entire time. Fact 13. The first animal America ever tried to save. That eyeless salamander went on to make history. In 1967, the Texas blind salamander became one of the very first animals placed on the Federal Endangered Species List, listed on March 11th of that year. It exists nowhere else on Earth except the water-filled caverns of the Edwards Aquifer around San Marcos. Growing to roughly 5 inches long, hunting entirely by sensing pressure waves in still, pitch-black water since it has no working eyes at all. Its internal organs are visible straight through its skin. The animal that helped launch American endangered species protection is one almost no Texan has ever laid eyes on. Fact 12. The hidden archipelago under central Texas. The salamander is not alone down there. Beneath the balcony's fault zone lives an entire ecosystem of creatures adapted to permanent darkness, including eyeless catfish, blind shrimp, isopods, amphipods, snails, spiders, harvestmen, pseudoscorpions, beetles, and millipedes. Because the limestone is broken into faulted, river-cut blocks, these populations got isolated from one another and evolved separately, producing an evolutionary pattern scientists compare to an island chain. It's an archipelago made of caves instead of islands. Underneath the highways of central Texas, evolution has been quietly running its own private experiment. Fact 11. The rock that's mostly still buried. Millions of Texans have climbed the Big Pink Dome near Fredericksburg. Almost none of them realize they're standing on the smallest visible piece of something enormous. Enchanted Rock is just one exposed knob of a granite batholith that spreads roughly 62 square miles underground, measuring something like 12 miles across and 20 miles long beneath the surface. Geologists still don't know exactly how deep into the earth it extends. What tourists photograph is the tip. The rest of that mountain is under the hill country, and nobody has ever seen it. Fact 10. The granite older than almost anything alive. That batholith carries a date that is difficult to process. Dating of zircon crystals puts the granite at roughly 1.08 billion years old. And calculations from the surrounding rock indicate it originally formed somewhere between 2 and 4 miles beneath the surface. Everything that once covered it, miles of rock, has been stripped away by erosion over the ages, which is the only reason any of it is visible now. It was already ancient before animals had bones. People picnic on top of a billion-year-old magma chamber and call it a nice afternoon. Fact 9. The oldest ground in Texas. Push a little further into that region and the numbers get older still. The El Alano Uplift holds the oldest rocks in the entire state, dated between roughly 1.23 and 1.37 billion years. Deformed metamorphic rock that began as sediment and volcanic material and was then cooked and crushed under heat and pressure. These rocks were buried for most of Earth's history and only came to the surface relatively recently in geologic terms. The oldest thing in Texas isn't a fossil or a ruin, it's the ground itself in a quiet stretch of the hill country. Fact 8. The craters, most Texans don't know exist. Ask anyone where America's meteor craters are, and they will say Arizona. Texas has 3 confirmed impact structures of its own, and hardly anybody can name a single one. The best known is Odessa Meteor Crater, formed when thousands of iron meteorites slammed into West Texas in prehistoric times, and it is the largest of several smaller craters clustered in that immediate area. There is also the Marquez Crater. And then there is the third one, which dwarfs both. Texas has been hit repeatedly from space, and none of it made the history books. Fact number 7. The 8-mile wound in West Texas. Down in Pecos County, about 20 miles south of Fort Stockton, sits something you can drive straight through without ever realizing what it is. The Sierra Madera crater spans roughly 8 miles across, formed by an impact estimated at less than 100 million years old. And its central rebound peak rises about 793 feet above the surrounding land. Highway 385 cuts directly through the structure. Most drivers see nothing but a strange cluster of hills. You can pass through an 8-mile asteroid crater at 70 miles an hour and never know it happened. Fact 6. The rock that got pushed up 4,000 feet. The force of that impact is almost impossible to picture until you look at what it did to the ground. In the center of Sierra Madera, the oldest rocks were driven upward roughly 1,200 meters, about 4,000 feet above where they should sit, through violent faulting and folding. Shock pressures at the site exceeded 200 kilobars. Geologists initially thought it was a promising oil structure and drilled it in the 1930s, finding shattered, intensely fractured rock and no commercial oil. It took decades to work out that the answer wasn't underground at all. Something from space punched Texas hard enough to lift bedrock most of a mile. Fact 5. The crater NASA used to practice for the moon. Here's the detail that ties it all together. Because Sierra Madera has a central uplifted peak, the same features seen in lunar craters like Copernicus, scientists studied it as a direct earthly stand-in for the moon. And Apollo 17 astronauts Gene Cernan and Jack Schmitt did some of their geologic training there. The crater sits on private property on the La Escalera Ranch, which means you generally cannot walk into it. Men who would soon be standing on the moon learned how to read a crater by studying one in West Texas, and most Texans have never heard its name. Fact 4. The mountains that were once a reef. The highest peaks in Texas look like classic desert mountains, dry, rocky, and sun-blasted. They are the fossilized remains of a reef. The Guadalupe Mountains, including the towering cliff of El Capitan, are the exposed portion of the Capitan Reef, which grew in a shallow tropical sea roughly 265 to 270 million years ago, when this region sat at the edge of the supercontinent Pangaea. USGS considers it one of the best preserved Permian fossil reefs on Earth. Ammonites, trilobites, crinoids, brachiopods, and snails turn up throughout the park. The tallest ground in Texas used to be underwater. Fact 3. The reef that wasn't built by coral. Everyone assumes a reef means coral. This one didn't. The Capitan Reef was constructed mainly by sponges and algae, along with bryozoans and tiny shelled organisms called fusulinids, plus calcium carbonate that precipitated directly out of the seawater. In places, the reef margins piled up as much as 1,000 meters of rock. Then, the Permian ended in the largest mass extinction in Earth's history, wiping out roughly 96% of all marine species. The reef stopped growing because nearly everything that built it died. What's left is a tombstone the size of a mountain range. Fact 2. The buried horseshoe nobody can see. Here's the part that puts the whole thing in perspective. The reef does not end at the park boundary. It is a horseshoe-shaped structure roughly 400 miles long, and it is exposed at the surface in only 3 places: the Guadalupe, Apache, and Glass Mountains. Everything else remains buried underground. After the sea dried up, sediment covered the reef completely, And it stayed hidden for something like 200 million years before tectonic forces shoved this one section back into daylight. Nearly all of that 400-mile reef is still down there in the dark, and no human will ever lay eyes on it. Fact 1. The Dead Sea that made Texas rich. And this is the secret hiding underneath everything else. That vanished Permian Sea and the basin it left behind are known today by a name every Texan recognizes: the Permian Basin. The same ancient marine environment that built the reef also laid down the sedimentary rock that holds the oil, which means the wealth, the boom towns, the entire industrial identity of West Texas traces directly back to what died in a tropical ocean a quarter of a billion years ago. Nearby, the same reef limestone was later dissolved by sulfuric acid to hollow out the enormous chambers of Carlsbad Caverns, just across the state line. Texas didn't get rich from what's on the land. It got rich from a sea that vanished before the dinosaurs, and almost nobody who works those fields has ever seen the reef that made it possible. So the next time somebody tells you Texas is all cattle, oil, and open highway, you'll know what's underneath. The ground out there is cratered, hollow, ancient, and full of things that have never seen light. An 8-mile asteroid scar the astronauts trained in, 20 miles of cave behind a locked gate, blind creatures evolving in the dark, and a dead reef 400 miles long holding up the whole economy. All of it hiding in plain sight. And now you're one of the few people who actually knows it's there. If this changed the way you see the place you live, stick around, because every state in this country is hiding something, and we're just getting started.